Welcome to Eerie Echoes. The ocean is vast, beautiful, and merciless. Out here, once the shoreline disappears, you are completely at the mercy of the ship beneath your feet and the people who control it. Cruise ships promise luxury, laughter, and escape. But behind the glass elevators and midnight buffets, there are corridors passengers never see. Locked cabins, hidden kitchens, and shows where the brightest lights conceal the darkest shadows. Tonight we'll step into those spaces. 8 true stories from the high seas, each one told not to frighten you with ghosts or myths, but with something colder. What really happens when thousands of strangers are sealed inside a floating city with no way out? So settle in, because once the ship leaves port, there's no turning back. They always tell you the sea has its own rules. Out there, miles from any port, what matters isn't the weather or the horizon. It's paperwork, access logs, and the little decisions made in offices passengers never see. I learned that the hard way on the Ocean Serenade, a Mediterranean cruise I took not long ago. It was supposed to be a simple assignment. A week of documenting the atmosphere on board, nothing out of the ordinary. At check-in, they handed me a key card with a practiced smile and said, "Cabin 9364 midship inside room. You'll like it. Very stable." When I slid my card into the lock for the first time, everything looked fine. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, the sheets crisp, the bathroom recently updated. Nothing to worry about. But the second night I noticed something that didn't fit. On the door frame, right where the latch met the strike plate, was a thin strip of clear tape, hardly visible unless the light hit it just right. When I opened the door, the tape tore. Someone had sealed it deliberately, like they were testing if anyone went in or out. I hadn't put it there. Later that night, a sharp odor crept into the cabin. Not smoke, not mildew. Something chemical, almost sweet and burning at the same time like fresh glue. My eyes watered, my head throbbed. I stepped into the corridor to clear my lungs. The next morning, I asked a steward named Mert about it. He glanced at the tablet in his hands, then quickly turned the screen away. "No record, sir," he muttered. But I'd seen the letters on his display. Oh, out of order. According to the system, cabin 9364 wasn't supposed to be booked at all. That night, I returned late, hoping exhaustion would make me ignore the smell. As I slid my card in, I realized the minibar wasn't as I'd left it. A bottle was missing, yet nothing showed on my account. Someone had been inside. So I went to security. On their computer, my room's log showed 3 entries. Mine, a housekeeping master key, and one labeled Tech Master 03 at 2:17 a.m. routine maintenance, the officer explained casually. But I'd been in hotels, ships, stations before. You don't send technicians into a guest's cabin at 2 in the morning without notice. The steward, Mert, cornered me later in the hallway. His voice dropped. "Don't tell anyone I said this. Last month they pumped sealant into the air ducts on that block. Bad mix. Should have kept those cabins closed, but the ship was full. They reopened some early." He shrugged. Like that explained everything. The more I looked, the stranger it got. The smoke detector above the bed was ringed with fresh paint, a thin bead of silicone along the edge. I nudged it and it shifted slightly in place. Was it tampered with, replaced, or just poorly repaired? Either way, I didn't want to find out. I asked guest services to move me. They apologized, smiled too much, and offered an upgrade. But when I pressed for paperwork, why was my cabin marked out of order in the first place? Their politeness cracked. The next morning, a technician handed me a single sheet. Routine odor complaint resolved. No signature, no cabin number, just a date. It was worth less than the paper it was printed on. Mert eventually slipped me something more real, a folded maintenance diagram. On it, 9,364, and the surrounding cabins were shaded in red. Beside mine was a note, "Reopen pilot." That's what I was. Part of a test to see if the smell had faded enough, if the problems had quieted down. They hadn't. By then, the headaches were worse. I went back to the infirmary. This time I didn't let them wave me off with talk of dehydration. I wanted a record, something written down. The nurse hesitated, tapped at her keyboard, and told me my file would be updated. Later, when I asked for a copy, the visit was gone, like it never happened. That's what stayed with me the most. Not the smell, not the tape on the door, not even the phantom technician at 2 in the morning, but the way the system erased things. Complaints vanished, logs overwritten, paperwork reshuffled. I left the ocean serenade at the next port. I still don't know if the people in charge reopened that block of cabins again. Maybe they scrubbed the ducks, maybe they didn't. What I do know is that somewhere on that ship, cabin 9,364 is probably back in rotation, waiting for another passenger who thinks they've just checked into an ordinary room. Out here, danger doesn't always come with ghosts or legends. Sometimes it's just a number on a maintenance sheet, changed from red to green because the ship needed another body in another bed. And that thought lingers more than any story of hauntings ever could. If this story unsettled you, share your thoughts in the comments. Others might have seen the same things and stayed quiet. And if you want to keep uncovering what really happens at sea, subscribe. That's how we keep these stories alive. And speaking of passengers who vanish, the next account isn't about a faulty cabin. It's about someone who boarded, was seen on camera, and then simply stopped existing. They say you can't just disappear on a ship. There are cameras in every hallway, scanners on every gangway, a manifest that counts every single body. That's what they tell you. But on the Emerald Crown, a Caribbean cruise I boarded 2 years ago, I learned how wrong that assumption can be. I wasn't the one who vanished, but I saw enough to know how easily it can happen. The ship was mid-sized, about 3,000 passengers, bright neon atriums and glass elevators, the sort of floating hotel that makes you forget you're moving through open sea. I'd boarded in San Juan, not for leisure but to follow up on a tip. A deckhand I knew from another assignment had whispered to me, "Watch the manifests. They don't always match the people." 3 nights in, that whisper turned into something solid. I was in the cafe on deck 7 when I first noticed him. A young man, maybe 27, wiry frame, brown hair that hadn't seen a comb in days. He sat alone at a corner table, staring at his phone like it was the only thing tethering him to the world. Later that evening, I saw him again at the pool bar, nursing a drink and talking to no one. The next day, he was gone. Not just absent from the usual haunts, but gone. His cabin, 5,412, still had his duffel bag, a pair of sneakers by the bed, even a half-written postcard on the desk. The steward who serviced that row swore he hadn't seen the man leave. "Bed untouched," he told me, shrugging like he didn't want to get involved. I reported it to guest services. They smiled politely, tapped at their computer, and told me, "There's no passenger registered in 5,412. Must be a mistake. Perhaps you saw another cabin number?" That wasn't possible. I had watched him swipe into 5,412 with my own eyes the day before, so I went digging. The ship's passenger count was posted daily on a crew bulletin board. I pushed harder. I spoke with a bartender who remembered serving him, with a woman from Ohio who'd sat next to him at trivia night. They all confirmed he was real, a fellow passenger. But when I asked them to describe him, they hesitated. Their memories seemed foggy, like recalling a dream. Finally, I got a glimpse of the CCTV. A friendly junior guard let me slip into the security office late one night. We queued up footage from Deck 5, the corridor outside 5412. There he was, clear as day, walking toward his room at 11:42 p.m. He reached for the handle. The door opened. He stepped inside. We fast-forwarded through the night. No exit, no visitors. The door never opened again. The next morning, the footage was different. Same timestamp, same corridor, but empty. No man, no movement. The file had been overwritten with a loop of silence. Maybe it glitched, the guard muttered, suddenly nervous. He logged out, told me I should leave. I didn't sleep that night. By the fourth day, his cabin had been reassigned. A honeymoon couple from Michigan moved into 5412, smiling at the steward as if nothing had ever been there before them. The duffel, the sneakers, the postcard, all gone. When I asked the steward what happened to the belongings, he stared at me blankly and said, "That room was unoccupied until today." I knew better. That evening on the promenade deck, I spotted the reflection of a familiar figure in the glass railing. Not in the flesh, just a reflection. The same brown hair, the same tired face, staring back at me for a fraction of a second before the crowd shifted and the glass showed only my own outline. Was I overtired? Maybe, but I wasn't the only one. A woman who'd been on the same trivia team approached me later and whispered, "You saw him too, didn't you? By the glass?" Her voice shook. The Emerald Crown docked in St. Thomas 2 days later. Local authorities boarded for a routine inspection. I tried to raise the missing passenger with them, but the purser intercepted me. "Don't spread rumors," he said quietly, his hand heavy on my shoulder. "We keep careful records here." When I disembarked at the end of the voyage, I checked the official manifest. Passenger 5412 didn't exist. Never had. And yet, I can still see that half-written postcard in my memory. The words scrawled across the top, "Wish you were here." The ocean feels endless. On land, we trust in paper trails. Out here, the trail is whatever someone types into a computer. One keystroke, and a person becomes nothing more than a ghost story told by those who still remember. If you've ever felt like someone just slipped away on a trip, share it in the comments. And if you want to keep following these accounts, subscribe. Out here, stories are the only proof that some people ever existed. And if that disappearance unsettled you, the next account dives even deeper. Below the passenger decks, into the kitchens, where not everything being served was meant for the menu. If you've ever worked on a ship, you know the kitchens are the heart that never sleeps. They feed thousands of passengers around the clock. 3 meals, buffets, midnight snacks, staff dining, room service, all of it flowing from one sprawling complex hidden deep below deck. I spent a short contract aboard the majestic Voyager, consulting on food operations. My job was supposed to be simple: observe, take notes, suggest efficiency improvements. I thought I'd be writing reports about storage, staffing, and supply chains. Instead, I ended up with something I still can't explain without my voice shaking. From day one, the galley was impressive. Stainless steel everywhere, ovens big enough to roast a cow whole, a system that could pump out 30,000 meals a day. The staff moved like clockwork. Filipino line cooks, Indian sous chefs, Eastern European bakers. Everyone had their place. But I started noticing inconsistencies. The invoices listed ingredients that didn't show up on menus. Exotic seafood, rare cuts of beef, expensive spices ordered in quantities far beyond what the passengers could possibly consume. When I asked the executive chef, a Frenchman named Laurent, he smiled tightly and said, "Private service, for VIPs only." Then he changed the subject. At first I believed him. Cruise lines do have special dining for top-paying passengers. But this didn't feel like extra lobster tails or vintage wine. These were orders for products I never saw leave the kitchen. One night, I stayed late after the dinner rush. The main galley emptied out slowly, workers scrubbing down counters, stacking trays, mopping floors. But I saw 3 senior staff slip away with carts covered in white cloths. They didn't take the service elevator to Deck 9 where the specialty restaurants were. They went down. Curiosity got the better of me. I followed, careful not to be noticed. The elevator they used didn't appear on my deck plans. I waited until it came back up, slipped inside, and pressed the button they'd used. It stopped between Deck 3 and Deck 4, on no official schematic. The doors opened onto a smaller kitchen, gleaming and silent. State-of-the-art equipment, spotless counters, the hum of refrigeration units. This wasn't a backup galley. It was something else. I heard voices at the far end. I crept closer, heart pounding. 2 chefs in white coats were bent over a table. For a moment, I thought they were prepping pork loins. Then I realized the proportions were wrong. Too small for a pig, too human in shape. The chefs were trimming and seasoning the flesh with the calm precision of men preparing a fine meal. I froze. My first thought was, this can't be real. My second was, I need to get out before they see me. But my foot scuffed against the floor. The sound echoed. Both men looked up. One of them smiled. "You're early," he said, his accent thick. "Laurent said you might join us." I mumbled something, pretended I'd taken a wrong turn, and backed out. My legs felt like lead as I hit the elevator button. Somehow no one stopped me. Back in my cabin, I tried to rationalize. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe my eyes tricked me. But when I checked my phone, I realized the photos I'd snapped, quick, blurry shots of the meat on the table, were gone, deleted. I hadn't touched them. The next day, Laurent pulled me aside. His tone was gentle but firm. "The Voyager has many operations. Some you do not need to see. You are here to write reports, not to snoop. Understand?" His eyes lingered just long enough to send a message. I kept my head down after that. But I noticed things differently. Certain passengers, always wealthy, always traveling alone, were given special treatment. Private invitations to exclusive tastings. They disappeared for hours, sometimes overnight. When they returned, they looked pale, shaken, almost drugged. I tried again to gather proof. This time I carried a small backup camera hidden in my tool bag. I filmed quietly from service corridors, catching glimpses of carts wheeled into that hidden kitchen. Carts that never returned. By the end of my contract, I had a handful of grainy clips and a stomach full of dread. When we docked in Miami, I disembarked without saying a word. I uploaded everything to a secure folder that same night. A month later, news broke that the majestic Voyager had been impounded. Federal agents raided it in port. Rumors spread of secret kitchens, hidden ledgers, and dozens of missing passengers over the years. The cruise line denied everything. Laurent disappeared. And me? I never worked at sea again. People think the ocean hides storms, wrecks, old legends. But the truth is simpler and darker. Out there, behind locked doors and polished dining rooms, the ocean hides whatever the people in charge want it to hide. And once you've seen it, you can't pretend you haven't. If this story disturbed you, let me know in the comments. Maybe someone else has noticed the same patterns. And don't forget to subscribe, because these stories only matter if they're heard. And if you think the kitchens are unsettling, wait until you hear what the ship's doctor discovered. Patients who vanished not into the sea but from their own medical records. They call the ship's infirmary the clinic. But really, it's a hospital compressed into a steel box. White walls, a faint smell of antiseptic that somehow never covers the tang of salt water seeping in through the vents, and the constant hum of machines that aren't supposed to fail. I'd taken a contract on the Paradise Dream as head physician, thinking it would be a step down from the endless chaos of emergency rooms on land. Out here, I told myself, the worst I'd face would be food poisoning, sprained ankles, maybe a heart attack or two. Nothing that could follow me into nightmares. I was wrong. It began with headaches. The first patient was Margaret Sullivan, a retired teacher from Boston. She came in complaining of a splitting pain behind her eyes, the sort that made her squint even in the clinic's dim light. Blood pressure normal, vitals stable, no history of migraines. I gave her fluids, painkillers, and sent her back to her cabin. 2 days later, Margaret returned. Only this time she couldn't remember her name. Her husband, Robert, sat at her side with tears streaming down his face as she asked him who he was. By the time I ran cognitive tests, she was convinced it was 1987 and she was back in her old classroom. We admitted her for observation. I ran blood panels, ordered scans on our limited equipment, prepared to send everything to shore-based labs when we reached Athens. But the next morning, her records were gone, completely erased from the system. No Margaret Sullivan, no test results, no admission logs. I confronted my head nurse, Patricia. She frowned, tapped at the terminal, and shook her head. "Doctor, I think you're overtired. We've never had a Mrs. Sullivan admitted." But I remembered Robert's tears. I remembered Margaret's trembling hands as she begged me to tell her where she was. And I remembered the results on my screen before they vanished. That afternoon, when I went to check her bed, it was empty. Sheets changed, everything neat. And Robert? I found him at the buffet, smiling, laughing with strangers. When I asked about his wife, his face went blank. "I'm traveling alone," he said. "Never been married." The words were too smooth, too rehearsed. It didn't stop with Margaret. Over the next month, more passengers came in with the same pattern. Headaches, dizziness, confusion, then sudden rapid memory collapse, and then nothing. No records, no names, no trace. It was as though they'd never been aboard at all. I started keeping my own notes, handwritten, hidden in a locked drawer in my cabin. Every patient, every symptom, every missing file. I even began snapping photos with my phone when I could, small acts of defiance in a place where everything could be erased with a keystroke. One night, making rounds, I heard voices from the morgue. That room was supposed to be empty. We hadn't recorded a single death on this voyage, yet muffled conversation carried through the door. I pressed my ear against it. Words filtered through. Processing times, dosage, shipment. I used my master key. The door swung open. The morgue wasn't a morgue anymore. It had been transformed into a laboratory. Bright surgical lights, stainless steel tables, IV drips hissing in the silence. Patients lay sedated, restrained with tubes in their spines. At one table stood Dr. Richards, a neurologist supposedly consulting part-time. At another was Patricia, my own head nurse. And beside them, dressed in surgical scrubs, was Captain Morrison. I stood frozen as Richards extracted cloudy fluid from a passenger's spine, noting results on a clipboard. Patricia adjusted vitals. The captain observed, impassive. When I gasped, they all turned. Richards smiled faintly. "Dr. Vasquez," he said, "we were hoping you'd understand." They explained it like it was logical, even noble. The Paradise Dream, they said, was a floating research vessel. They weren't treating patients, they were experimenting, testing compounds that induced rapid onset dementia, measuring responses, harvesting spinal fluid for analysis, all in the name of medical advancement. Alzheimer's, dementia, memory loss, Diseases that rob millions, Richard said calmly. We're accelerating progress. The ocean keeps us contained. Nobody asks questions here. And the captain added, the passengers chosen are those who won't be missed. I had a choice, join them or join the patients. For 2 months, I pretended to cooperate. I donned scrubs, took notes, passed myself off as part of their team. All the while, I smuggled evidence, photos on my backup phone, recordings hidden in my quarters, samples sealed in vials. When my contract ended in Barcelona, I slipped ashore with everything I had. Interpol took 8 months to act, but when they did, they seized the ship. Dozens of sedated patients were pulled from hidden compartments. Richards and Patricia were arrested. Captain Morrison vanished into the wind. I still work in medicine, but hospitals feel safer than the sea ever did. The scariest thing wasn't the science. It was how easily records erased lives. Out there, memory itself became disposable, just another entry to delete when it caused trouble. And if memory can be erased, what proof do we really have of anything? If this story made you uneasy, let me know in the comments. Sometimes sharing what we've seen is the only way to keep it from disappearing. And if you want to hear more stories they'd rather erase, subscribe. That way, these voices aren't lost. Because the next case isn't about doctors or patients, it's about insurance investigators. And what one of them found on a midnight balcony makes disappearing overboard look less like accident and more like business. People imagine falling overboard on a cruise ship is rare, tragic, and always an accident. But if you've spent time at sea, you learn the truth is far murkier. Out here, between insurance payouts and vanishing records, the ocean swallows more than just unlucky passengers. I was on the Ocean Vista not as a tourist, but as an insurance investigator. After 15 years in maritime claims, I thought I'd seen it all. Fires, groundings, food poisoning outbreaks. I boarded this ship for the first real vacation I'd given myself in a decade. But old habits die hard. It was the 5th night. We were between Jamaica and Grand Cayman, the air soft and still, the waves so calm the ship barely rocked. I was on my balcony with a glass of bourbon when I heard voices above me. Urgent, hushed, the kind of tone you recognize instantly if you've ever listened in on arguments that weren't meant for you. At first, just muffled words. Then the scrape of furniture, a shout, and a cry, "No, please!" Cut short by the unmistakable splash of a body hitting water. I lunged to the railing. In the ship's wake, a man flailed, arms flashing white in the floodlights. He kicked hard, trying to swim, but within seconds the ship had carried us past him. I dialed the bridge immediately, reported man overboard, gave the time and location. Sirens wailed, engines shifted, spotlights scoured the waves. Rescue boats churned into the dark. But what chilled me wasn't the body in the water. It was the people on the balcony above me. For 2 hours, the crew searched. The captain made an announcement about an incident. And then, just like that, we resumed course. The next morning, I asked guest services about the man. The young woman at the desk looked confused. "Sir, no incident has been recorded. Everyone is accounted for," I argued. She checked her screen, shook her head. "There is no missing passenger." I knew what I'd seen. So I started digging. Passenger manifests were pinned in crew areas. We had left Miami with 2,847 guests. After the incident, the sheet read 2,846, adjusted as though nothing was wrong. I visited the suite directly above mine, the balcony where I'd seen the 3 figures. A woman in her 60s answered, cheerful and unsuspecting. She said she was traveling alone, had been asleep early the previous night. When I asked about others on her balcony, she frowned. "No one else has access." Her sincerity unnerved me. because I had seen 3 shadows leaning on that railing, and shadows don't lie. I needed another angle. I spoke with Carlos, a ship photographer I'd befriended. At first he was cautious, but when I told him I was an investigator, his shoulders sagged. He'd noticed it too. He showed me secret shots he'd hidden on his personal drive. Passengers meeting quietly with uniformed crew. Always the same type. Wealthy, single, often elderly. He whispered the name of one man, Vincent Torres, assistant head of security. According to Carlos, Torres ran a ring. They targeted vulnerable passengers who had recently taken out large life insurance policies. During the voyage, they isolated them. Friendly conversations, private dinners, special treats, and then, one night, the passenger vanished overboard. Officially, it was always ruled accidental. Conveniently, the insurance payouts went to distant relatives or business partners. I pulled records. In the past 5 years, the Ocean Vista had logged 6 overboards, all matched the same pattern. Single travelers, recent policies, strange beneficiaries, total payout, over $45 million. I remembered the man I'd seen kicking in the water, and my stomach turned. The rest of the voyage, I played the tourist, smiling at crew, sitting through shows, blending in. All the while, Carlos and I gathered evidence. Photos, names, financial trails. We built a case strong enough to survive more than one missing report. When we docked in Fort Lauderdale, we went straight to the FBI. The investigation cracked open a network that spanned ships and ports. Torres and 8 crew were arrested, along with accomplices on shore. The insurance scam was bigger than either of us had guessed. 24 confirmed deaths, many more suspected. The Ocean Vista was impounded, executives dragged into courtrooms. I returned home, but vacations never felt the same. Every time I see a balcony cabin, I wonder if the railing has been leaned on by someone timing a fall. At sea, the line between tragedy and profit is thinner than most passengers ever realize. Out there, a death can be worth millions, as long as the paperwork is written correctly. If you've ever heard of cases like this, or if something similar unsettled you on your own travels, share it in the comments. And if you want to keep hearing the stories most people never talk about, subscribe. It makes sure these voices don't sink into silence, because the next story doesn't come from an investigator. It comes from someone who lived behind the camera, a travel photographer who stumbled onto something her magazine never published. Magazines love cruise ships. They love the photos of glittering atriums, infinity pools spilling into turquoise seas, waiters serving champagne under chandeliers. That's why Coastal Living hired me. I was their freelancer for luxury travel, and the Sovereign Seas, on her maiden voyage from Barcelona to Miami, was supposed to be my masterpiece. I had credentials most passengers never see. A premium suite, a crew badge that let me through service doors, and the smiling escort of Elena Martinez, the ship's PR director. She said she wanted authentic behind-the-scenes coverage. What I didn't know was that my access wasn't a perk, it was a test. The first week went as expected. I shot elegant dining rooms, sprawling kitchens, the bridge with its digital navigation screens. Crew were friendly, sometimes too friendly, but I chalked it up to the artificial cheer cruise lines train into every smile. It was the second week when the shine cracked. I'd stayed up late, chasing the endless operation theme. Photos of night shift cleaners polishing marble floors, bakers pulling bread at 3 a.m. in the maze of corridors. I took a wrong turn. My badge, meant only for PR escorts, opened a door it shouldn't have. The hallway was different, older with peeling paint and flickering fluorescence. Not the glossy, renovated corridors I'd been walking all week. No signage. Just a heavy door with a brass plate. 7. Behind it, voices. I leaned close. At first, the words blurred. English, Spanish, something Asian-sounding, maybe Tagalog. Then I caught fragments. New arrivals, processing before Miami, keep them healthy. I froze. Arrivals? Processing? That wasn't kitchen talk. I lifted my camera, snapped a shot of the door. My hands shook so badly the frame blurred. I stepped back, meaning to leave quietly, but the sound of footsteps made me turn. It was James Rodriguez, an assistant cruise director I'd worked with earlier. His smile was gone. "Amanda," he said flatly, "you're far from the photography zones." He held out his hand. "Give me the card." I knew which card he meant. My memory card, the one with the photo of the door. He told me it was security protocol, that sensitive areas required clearance. He promised it would be returned after review. He was polite, calm, but the message was clear. I'd been caught somewhere I didn't belong. The next day, he returned the card. Empty. Every shot from that hallway wiped. I carried a backup camera after that. Smaller, easier to hide. And I started paying attention. That's when I noticed the numbers didn't add up. I followed supply carts, watched elevators stop at decks that didn't exist on any plan I'd been given. Noticed food and medical supplies rerouted to places that weren't labeled on crew maps. On the 12th day, I hid near a service elevator. 2 crew pushed carts stacked with bottled water and trays of sealed meals. They swiped special cards. The elevator descended between Deck 1 and Deck 2, a non-existent level. When the doors shut, I slipped inside and hit the same button. The elevator jolted, then opened onto a hidden deck. It was a warren of steel rooms, narrow hallways. Security cameras angled down. I heard voices, low, strained. Then I saw them. People. Dozens. Some in dirty clothes, some barefoot. They were corralled in a makeshift holding area, seated on the floor with plastic ties around their wrists. A housekeeping crew member passed out food trays. A man in a white polo marked names off a clipboard. I ducked back before anyone noticed me, heart hammering so hard I nearly dropped the camera. I snapped 3 shaky shots, then fled. That night, Elena Martinez invited me to dinner with Captain Holbrook, a private meal in his quarters. Candles, fine wine, steak that tasted like ash in my mouth. He smiled warmly, as if he'd known me forever. He told me I'd seen things, meant for no one outside the company. He explained the operation like it was just another branch of hospitality. Hidden decks, hidden passengers, hidden profits. Human cargo moved across borders disguised as cruise liners. The money, he said, was too good and too powerful to fight. He gave me the choice. Play along, write my glowing article, and be rewarded with partnerships. Or vanish quietly, like so many before me. I nodded, smiled, drank his wine, and prayed he couldn't hear the pounding of my pulse. What he didn't know was that every photo, every note, every recording was already backed up to a cloud server. I'd set it to release to multiple news outlets if I didn't check in within 24 hours of docking. The Sovereign Seas reached Miami. Federal agents boarded within hours. They found compartments hidden behind steel bulkheads, 127 people in captivity, some weeks old, some months. Elena, James, the captain, they were all arrested. My photos were never published by Coastal Living. Too messy, too dangerous. But they live in court records now. Proof of what happens when a ship is treated as a floating, borderless prison. People think cruise ships are playgrounds, floating cities of leisure. But I know better. They're also perfect cages, places where thousands vanish into the steel belly, hidden in plain sight while the rest of us sip cocktails by the pool. If this story shook you, share your thoughts in the comments, because silence is how these stories get buried. And subscribe, So the next time a photographer sees too much, you'll hear about it. Because the next account isn't about photos. It's about food. And what one chef found in a secret galley will change the way you think about what's on your plate. When people imagine cruise ship kitchens, they picture glamour, gleaming steel counters, white-hatted chefs tossing pans in choreographed chaos, buffets that never run out of shrimp. I thought the same, until I signed a 6-month contract aboard the majestic Voyager as a culinary consultant. On paper, my role was simple: streamline operations, raise standards, and train staff. I'd worked in hospital kitchens, corporate dining halls, even military mess facilities. But this was different. 4,800 passengers, 12 restaurants, 30,000 meals a day. It was a floating city, and the galley was its heartbeat. The first month was everything I'd expected. Tight schedules, precise prep lists, chefs from every corner of the world moving like clockwork. Executive Chef Laurent Dubois ran it like a symphony. Sharply accented French orders barked over the clatter of pans. He was demanding, but respected. Everyone said the same thing. Laurent keeps the ship fed, and no one goes hungry under his watch. Still, small inconsistencies nagged at me. Orders of high-end ingredients, Wagyu beef, black truffles, rare shellfish, came in at quantities far above what our menus could account for. When I asked Laurent, he waved it off. VIP program, he said. Exclusive dining for the wealthiest guests. Very private. That answer didn't sit right. I'd worked kitchens long enough to know how to match food volume to plate count. These numbers didn't add up. I began noticing patterns. Certain chefs, always the most experienced, disappeared during peak dinner service. They'd vanish through service tunnels and return hours later, silent, eyes lowered, smelling of garlic and iron. Other staff avoided talking about it, pretending not to notice. So one evening, I followed. Carlos, a sous chef from Manila, carried a crate of produce down a service corridor I hadn't seen on the deck plans. He swiped a special card at an unmarked elevator. I slipped in behind him, timing the doors just right. The panel lit up with a floor that technically didn't exist, 3A. When the doors opened, I stepped into another galley. Smaller than the main one, but more advanced. Top-tier equipment, expensive knives, shelves lined with wines I hadn't seen listed for passengers. A second kitchen, hidden. At first I thought I'd stumbled on the VIP program, but then I saw the prep tables. On one, chefs worked calmly, precisely, trimming meat with the same focus as if it were filet mignon. Only it wasn't beef or lamb. The cuts were too large, the organs too human. Kidneys, a liver, a pair of lungs laid out like specimens in a lab. The room tilted. I clutched the doorframe to steady myself. They were cooking people. I ducked into a storage alcove, bile burning my throat as I listened to their chatter. Casual, professional. Pan-sear the liver, quick braise on the heart, pair the kidneys with truffle sauce. That night, Laurent found me before I found him. His tall frame filled the doorway, his face pale but calm. "Chef Thompson," he said smoothly, "I think we need to discuss boundaries." He didn't shout. He didn't deny. He led me to his office, poured me a glass of wine, and explained. This was the ultimate luxury, he said. A program for billionaires, royals, untouchables, who had tasted every forbidden dish and wanted one more step beyond. The final taboo, he called it, eyes glinting like candlelight off a blade. Victims weren't random. They were selected, wealthy but alone, elderly without close family, passengers who could disappear without noise. Crew befriended them, isolated them, then invited them to exclusive tastings. They never returned to their cabins. The bodies, Laurent said, were prepared with respect. Humane, professional, elevated, the highest form of cuisine. He gave me the same choice every whistleblower gets at sea: join, profit, or become the menu. I played along. For the next weeks, I observed, memorizing details, tucking notes into my chef's coat, snapping covert photos with a hidden camera. Every night I swallowed back nausea as I watched human flesh treated like Kobe beef, plated with saffron risotto, paired with Chateau Margaux. The clientele? Powerful people. Men and women flown in at embarkation points under false names. They dined in hidden salons below Deck 4, candlelight glittering off crystal glasses, laughing softly as they chewed. Each meal worth $500,000, each passenger reduced to tasting notes. On the final night of my contract, I slipped into my cabin, uploaded every file to a secure server, and left my phone recording in my coat pocket during a VIP service. I wanted voices, names, evidence. When we docked in Fort Lauderdale, I disembarked like any other crew. Hours later, federal agents stormed the majestic Voyager. Laurent and his staff were arrested mid-service. The ship's hidden kitchen was exposed. Records showed 43 passengers had been selected over 7 years. I still dream about the walk-in cooler, the steel trays, the way the chefs joked as they diced. Food is supposed to nourish, to comfort. On that ship, it became proof of how far power and wealth can twist human hunger. Every time I see a white tablecloth now, I wonder what it's hiding. If this story unsettled you, leave your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes putting it into words is the only way to process it. And if you want to hear more hidden truths from behind the steel walls of these floating cities, subscribe. Because the next story isn't about chefs or dining rooms, it's about entertainment. How technology meant to amuse passengers was used for something much darker. Cruise ships are designed to impress. They dazzle with atriums taller than city halls, theaters packed with technology you'd normally see in Vegas, and light shows that make people forget they were on a moving vessel in the middle of the ocean. The Aurora Sun was one of those ships, a floating spectacle with a theater that could hold over 1,000 guests. Most passengers thought of it as pure entertainment. I learned it was something else entirely. I was hired as a consultant, meant to review how the entertainment systems connected to passenger experiences. The theater was the crown jewel, seating mapped to glowing wristbands, shows timed to second-by-second cues, lighting synced to music that rattled the floor. Everything seemed state-of-the-art, and that was the problem. It was too connected. The entertainment servers didn't just talk to lighting and sound, they could also trigger security cameras, door locks, and even certain access points deep in the ship. It was billed as safety integration. To me, it looked like a doorway no one should have left open. On the third night, while seated in the control booth, I noticed something strange. Most wristbands pulsed in unison, creating waves of light across the audience, but a few flickered in a different color, isolated and out of sync. At the same time, ushers in technician uniforms moved quietly toward those seats. The timing was perfect, just as the house lights dipped and the finale's strobe effects kicked in. The chosen passengers were guided out through a side door labeled as a backstage lounge. According to the ship's blueprints, that lounge didn't exist. The pattern repeated. Each night, 1 or 2 passengers were singled out, their wristbands coded differently, their exit hidden behind the choreography of the show. Strobe lighting, smoke bursts, and confetti made sure cameras recorded nothing clear. The cues in the show file weren't just for lighting and sound. They included commands that temporarily disabled surveillance in specific stairwells and corridors. What looked like a spectacle for the audience was also cover for something else. I tried to track the movement of those passengers afterward. Wristbands made it easy. They were supposed to log every location on the ship. But after being escorted through that backstage door, the signals always went dark. No more pings at restaurants, cabins, or bars. Just silence. The official records later showed them as having disembarked early, even though their belongings remained in their cabins until the end of the voyage. My attempts to ask questions were met with carefully measured indifference. The entertainment team brushed it off as a feature of the system. Security insisted that temporary camera outages were normal during high-intensity light shows. It was a neat explanation, but too neat. I had seen the patterns. By the sixth night, I forced a break in the system. Using my access terminal, I injected a fault into the pyro cues that automatically triggered a safety hold. House lights went full, alarms muted, and every emergency protocol unlocked. For the first time, the process didn't unfold in the dark. I followed the route where passengers were usually taken. The door marked as a backstage bar stood ajar in the confusion. Beyond it, a small lounge had been staged with care. Soft seating, bottled drinks, a decorative arrangement to mask the sterility of steel walls. 2 passengers sat there, dazed but alive, while staff hovered with the same calm precision they displayed on stage. It looked almost ordinary, which made it worse. Security arrived within minutes, along with senior managers who never appeared in public spaces. The situation was contained with quiet efficiency. The passengers were escorted away under the guise of medical evaluation, and the space was sealed again. The next morning, their names appeared on the departure list as early disembarkations. I left the ship at the next port, with enough evidence to piece the pattern together. Show files with hidden commands, system logs showing doors and cameras cycling during finales, photos of that lounge. Maritime authorities later confirmed that similar integrations existed on other vessels in the same fleet. Nothing about it was supernatural. No ghosts, no curses. Just a process hidden inside the machinery of entertainment that selected people and guided them out of sight. What disturbed me most was how seamless it was, how the same cues that made an audience gasp in delight also created 60 seconds of darkness for someone to vanish. Cruise theaters are built to amaze, but on this ship the spectacle was also a mask. Lights, smoke, music, tools of wonder that doubled as camouflage for something no passenger agreed to be part of. The line between entertainment and control was erased, and once you've seen it, you can't watch a show the same way again. If this account unsettled you, let me know in the comments what part struck you most. Sharing your thoughts helps bring these hidden stories to light. And if you want to hear more stories like this, accounts from the shadows of cruise ships, subscribe to support the work. We've gone from cabins that shouldn't exist, to hidden galleys, to theaters where even applause can cover something darker. These have been 8 stories from the open sea, stories meant to remind us that not every voyage is as safe or as simple as it looks. The ocean hides many secrets, and some of them are still out there. That brings us to the end of tonight's voyage. 8 stories, each one a reminder that not all dangers at sea come from storms or waves. Some are built into the very walls, routines, and systems we trust. If you found these stories chilling, let us know what you think in the comments. Your thoughts help keep these accounts alive. And if you'd like to hear more true stories from the shadows of the ocean, make sure to subscribe and support the channel. Until next time, stay safe, stay watchful, and remember, the sea never truly sleeps.